Hey, welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you, and thanks for checking out the channel. Hope you're doing fantastic out there. If you guys could subscribe to this channel, that'd be great. And also to the Tobin and Leroy show on all your podcast platforms. And you guys can watch us for our YouTube visitors out there, our YouTube watchers out there. We're live on YouTube every single weekday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. You guys can get on the live chat on YouTube or Twitch. So do check us out. That would be absolutely fantastic. So I'm diving into this Mike McDaniel press conference from today. He had a gaggle of media around him today to hear his long-winded answers on many of things. And I think probably the quote that got the most buzz today, outside of the Tyreek Hill stuff, which obviously was noteworthy and newsworthy because of where we're at with all this, Mike McDaniel had this whole quote about wanting to be in the Nick Sirianni hot seat. That Nick Sirianni was on the hot seat last year, and that's where I want to be. Because, people were, they were asking, like, hey, have you gotten any demands from Stephen Ross as to what amount of wins you need? And I got to say, like, if Mike McDaniel makes the playoffs again, will Stephen Ross fire him? So does he have to win a playoff game? You never know. Like, if they end up in a Viking situation where they're 14-3 and they end up losing to somebody awesome on some weird stuff, obviously there's caveats, but let's be real about it. It kind of feels like the last stand. If him and Chris Greer aren't able to get this team to a playoff victory, then all of it feels like it's, all right, time to move on. And even, one of the things that's been interesting, at least to this point, is the Miami Dolphins have restructured some deals. They haven't restructured Tua's. And to me, that almost feels like you guys can do a lot, but I'm not putting that on the books for the next 4 years. This guy better either work out or we want it out as much as possible. So Stephen Ross gives you as many resources as he normally does, but that one, you're not going to throw that anchor in my lap. And we're not going to be in a spot where if this guy is another hit away, which, to be fair, is the responsible thing. You don't want a Cleveland Browns situation. Not the off the field stuff. Clearly, with Deshaun, Tua seems like an A+ dude. But from an availability standpoint, that's not the only issue with Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson also been very unavailable with shoulder injuries, now an Achilles blown. And they're basically in a position where they either got to get a minimum guy on the cheap skis or they got to go draft somebody. And you want to be able to have that flexibility, whatever the next regime is going to have on its plate. But Mike McDaniel had this quote today that got a lot of attention, that he wants to be the next Nick Sirianni, that he wants to be in a position where he wants that Nick Sirianni hot seat. And it was a choice. Here was Mike.
He knows my expectation is to be the best person for the job. And, that can get convoluted. Was I the best person for the job last year? We lost more than we won. We were 8-9. There's a bunch of variables in that. There's variables in success. I think Nick Sirianni was, I want to be on that hot seat he was on last year. But what else would I expect? You're not entitled to position, and ultimately, if it's deemed that the organization would be best served with someone else, like I'm more on board with that than people realize. I think that's a natural part of. It's why I didn't start. It's why I was able to not change when the same people are pointing out my failures were hyping me up through success. This is the fastest changing world in sports. Again, Nick Sirianni was on the hottest seat.
Okay, so there you go. Here's the thing, though, dude. And I think for the most part, I maybe am one of those guys guilty of hyping up Mike McDaniel. But I think people go at this from this perspective with him, which is, I think a lot of people love the innovation that Mike McDaniel brings to the table. Everybody, I think, would acknowledge that this guy's got something in his bag that people want to copy, people want to utilize. But there's been a little bit of, one, he's gotten figured out. Two, that his ability to run the show while also running the game, all of that stuff has, I think, fairly been called into question. The other thing where you compare it to Nick Sirianni, and I'm sorry that you got to do this, but dude, Nick Sirianni went to a Super Bowl already. They lost, but they went. And while, yes, it would be nice to put you in the conversation of Nick Sirianni and people thinking in Philadelphia at one point he should be fired because he's a boob, and he also had calls that he couldn't control the locker room because A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts, couldn't get along and all that. But even with that being said, the guy still has already been to heights that this franchise has not been to. I venture to say that the next Dolphins coach who could get a playoff win and could get to the AFC Championship game, because the Dolphins are so thirsty, that guy's going to be treated like a god, let alone the Super Bowl. The thing that's different with Philadelphia is look, the truth about it is Philadelphia is at a place where they are championship or bust. They've won Super Bowls recently. They've been to Super Bowls recently. There's just a different standard that they got. And the Dolphins aren't even hitting the low part of the standard, which is win a damn playoff game. So, okay, you want to be on the seat that dude, I got to tell you, I don't know if Mike McDaniel's seeing the end of last season if he's in a market like Philadelphia. That's just the facts about it. There is something about that Northeast media machine where, the pressure, the hate, the vitriol, I don't got, sports radio down here, we don't got that, dude. I don't got the 900 callers who want to call for your head. Now, it'll happen after Dolphins losses. We'll do a Monday and people will blow up. I can tell you this is somebody, I find it important. I want to hear, it's not just from people in comments and chats. I like hearing, the voice of people down here who are frustrated. But I'm telling you, you could do that in Philadelphia, where I could probably draw that out a day, after tough losses or big time wins. Philadelphia is a market where they are pissed off all the time. So when he says, give me the Nick Sirianni hot seat, dude, that does not exist down here. That is not a thing you are not going to face. That's just the facts of it. You're not. And quite frankly, you've already shown that you haven't, because the owner basically lets you guys go out there, keep your jobs. You all made fools out of yourselves after the season was over with that boob of a press conference that you put forth, and let us all know that, oh yeah, by the way, nobody was showing up on time. Nobody was respecting team meetings. These are meetings that you had to have at the end of the year. And mind you, this is his third year as head coach, not his first. And we thought that that's also to put on top of, you had a diva wide receiver issue like Sirianni did. And yeah, sure, Jalen Hurts has dealt with some of the doubting questions that Tua has, but again, has been to higher heights than Tua has. And I say that as somebody who is also a Tua fan. I like Tua Tagovailoa. I hope that he's able to get the franchise to where it wants, to where everybody expects it to go. But I heard that today from Mike McDaniel, and I was like, dude, shut up. You don't even know what you're asking for there. It really is tepid at best, the pressure that he's dealing with right now. Because in reality, what has Mike McDaniel lost out of all this? There hasn't been a calling to replace his coordinators right away like Sirianni has. He's kind of gotten to go back. Now, he's had to replace his defensive coordinators because you inherited one. One was an old curmudgeon bastard that left and won the Super Bowl. And now it seems like you got a guy that you like in Weaver. But one of the other things people have been asking for, hey, give up the play calling. Can you do that like Sirianni had? Not ready to do that. I'm not ready to Mike's like, I'll take the pressure, but I'm not ready to relinquish that. And I think a lot of people would say, hey, man, maybe that would be best if you would go in that direction. But Sirianni showed a willingness to do it, and I don't think Mike McDaniel has shown that willingness yet. So when you, again, say things like, I bring on that hot seat that Sirianni had, it rings a little hollow. I got to tell you, it really does from my standpoint, because I'm looking around and I'm trying to see, like, all right, what have been the changes that he's actively done? Yeah, maybe there's been changes in some of the ways that they've called games and they showed ways to adjust, but talking about the attitude of the team, the mentality of the team, it's still kind of the same. None of that stuff has really changed. And meanwhile, Sirianni, even if he has a doofus face, he's got a play right now that's got everybody bitching and moaning around the league because they're too physical. They have basically been put in the place where we need to outlaw their most physical play because it's cheating. It's rugby. The Miami Dolphins, I guess you got a little of that with the cheat motion and all that type of stuff that people were whining about, but ultimately, no one's like we're not breaking down the NFL meetings. We're sitting out here live from the breakers where we are going to decide whether or not the tush push is legal. It hasn't been to that level. It hasn't been like the little memo that the referees got. So it's cute for Mike McDaniel to say that, but I don't really know how much he knows what that means to deal with the pressure that Nick Sirianni has, because I don't even think that he's gotten to the spot that got Nick Sirianni that pressure in the first place.